Hello, everybody. Get my cameras a little fixed up here. Why is that so zoomed in? Fix that. 1 sec. Hang with me here, everybody. All right, there we go. Cool. All righty. Hello. All right, I'm just checking everything here. Looks like we're going to be live on everything soon. Instagram is up. YouTube is up. Looks like Facebook is going to be just behind here a little bit, but that's fairly typical. We've found. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our office hours stream today. It is the third Wednesday of the month, so it is office hours day. We're here to answer any gummy questions you all may have. All right. Okay, cool. You guys can hear me. That's great. Awesome. And again, guys, we are live right now on YouTube. We are live on our Instagram. We are also live on our Facebook group, which is the Gummy Makers Community, powered by Candy Pros. So I'm going to get questions from all three of those different streams. Some things lag behind. So if you drop a question in the chat, I promise I'll get to it. I just might not see it immediately, depending on where you are commenting. But all right, cool. You can all hear me. All right, guys. So as we go through the Q&A today, as people are dropping in questions, coming in and out, I'm also going to be making a batch of our pectin gummy base. Going to be making some watermelon gummies. So that's going to be going as I'm chatting with you. If you are on YouTube and you can see the full screen, you can see it over here on my left. Let me go ahead and show everybody for our verticals. All right. This might have to move. So I do have a pot of water boiling over here, which I am going to be using to melt down our pectin base. So let me go ahead. I'll move us over to overheads. Cool. All right, guys. So I'm going to get our pectin gummy base in that boiling water. Got a 5-pound bag of our pectin base here. And all I'm doing with this shaking is making sure all the gummies get a little coated. And then I will be blending that down shortly as it comes and warms up. All right, cool. So on YouTube, you guys can see it here on my little, there we go, left-hand side. It's kind of hard to get the directions right, but there we go. All righty. Check around, see if anything. Got any questions going? Hello, everybody. Thank you all for jumping in on our stream today. So like I said, I'm going to be making a batch of pectin gummies as we go along. So these have been in the water for about a minute. So I'm going to get to blending these here. So let me go back to our overhead. Do I have a small size? Okay, got a question in here real quick. Let's do that. Do I have a small size recipe for making gummies with naked pectin base. So essentially, you can make as small as a batch as you want to. You might get too small to do it in a pot, and you can do that in the microwave. It just takes a little while, and you have to be safe with it. But all you're doing is scaling down your water. Cook times will probably be a little bit quicker on a smaller batch. But you just need to make sure you're watching it and that you're blending it down in time so it's not burning, which is what I'm going to do right here. All right, so let's get the overhead here. Overhead, cool. And there we go. We'll do this one. All right, I think you guys should have the audio, the elevator music going, so I'm going to mute my channel right now because it's going to get loud. All right, guys, I am back. I think you can hear me again. I think the music is gone. All right. All right, now that is going to come up to temp. I'm going to get my probe thermometer in there. So it'll let me know when we've gotten to that point. Let's do this one over 2 pots while I'm doing this. All right, cool. So I do have my probe thermometer here. I'm going to make sure that it is kept off of the bottom of the pot, or else I'm going to get false readings. And I have my thermometer set to alert me when it reaches 245 degrees. You can see here, I have it set to 245. And that'll be my heads up that we are at the correct temperature. All right. Get us back to our main here. We'll go back to main. And we'll keep that one up on the YouTube. All right, cool, guys. Thanks for hanging with me through that. All right, how much water in the beginning? So our SOP recommends it's 1 pound of water for every 5 pounds of gummies. Oh, certain? Yes. Which is right around a liter or so. You can minimize that as you get more familiarized with the product. You will just have less ability to jump in and fix things quickly. So we recommend going with the SOP amounts to start. And if you want to try to speed things up through the cooking process, you can lower that water amount as you get more comfortable with the product. But we wouldn't recommend starting. All right, cool. Great question, thank you. And why is Facebook is so far behind? I don't know why it is always like that. Okay. Instagram here. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in with us. If you're over on Instagram or YouTube, over on our Facebook group as well. But I will make sure, like, if you are on our YouTube page here where you can see the full screen, I'm going to have this pot up on the screen the entire time so you guys can watch it come boil, see the different stages that it's going to go through as it melts down. All right, and then, so one of the things that I'd like to point out as we're going through this pectin process, you guys saw I blended that base pretty quickly after pouring it into the boiling water. You don't want to wait too long on that because you want to make sure that all of your gummies are properly blended. One, to help with the melting, but two, it's going to greatly reduce the chance of any of those gummy pieces sticking to the bottom of your pot and burning as they cook. So you want to make sure that you get that blended down once all of the gummies have gotten wet and started to melt a little bit, just because you don't want any of the large pieces to get stuck on the bottom. How high is my heat? My heat right now is at 375 degrees. So it's pretty, and it'll probably stay there most of the time. When I'm working with this small of a batch, that tends to be pretty great. Different batch sizes, I might adjust it a little bit. For example, I might turn it down a little bit on a much larger batch size to make sure that, you know, I'm not cranking something too hard into the finish. All right. Facebook is still behind. I don't know why. It's about. All right. Hello. Hi, friend Eddie. Thanks for joining us. All right. Great. All right. So yeah, that blending step is very important, not just for the melting, but to make sure that you're having the same outcome every time, and that you're not allowing anything to get stuck to the bottom of the pan. So let me go ahead. I'm going to jump over here to part 2. Will you be adding anything into this batch? This batch is going to be a basic watermelon flavored gummy. So I'm going to be adding in my flavor as well as my color. But those are the only 2 things I'm going to be adding to this batch today. They're not special gummies or anything like that. All right, but if you guys are here in stream, if you have any questions about making gummies, drop them in the chat, and I will get to them as fast as I see them come up. But thank you for the questions, T710. And guess what kind of gummies you make? All right, and then as we go through this batch, you guys can see that it is now starting to come up to a little bit of a boil. It's at about 217 degrees right now. My thermometer is going to let me know when we hit 245. That's what I'm going to be pulling it off at for this batch. And so what we're doing now is both melting the pectin as well as cooking out the water that we used to melt down the pectin. And the reason that we use temperature rather than telling people how long that's going to take is because you can add slightly different amounts of water at the beginning. You can have different humidity where you're doing it. You can be adding different amounts of heat. Even if, you know, my induction burner says 375, that 375 on your induction burner might be a little bit different. And that could be just be the heating element, that could be how thick the base of your pot is, a bunch of different things. So why we use temperature as the trigger points to let us know when we're through certain parts of the cook stage is because that is far more consistent than things like time. And so if you ever are kind of wondering, Why do we only use these temperatures? It's because that's how we can get consistent across all you guys using our base. All right, so it looks like Facebook is not even started. It's wild. I don't know what's going on. But we are good on Instagram. Hello, Mowgli, bro. All right, so as the water cooks out of this batch, essentially what we're doing is now that it's above the boil, it is just evaporating the water out that we used to melt down the pectin mix. This will probably, given the amount of water I started with, this will probably wrap up in about 40 to 45 minutes, but we're going to be going through that whole thing throughout the stream. So I've got my molds here that we're going to be throwing it on top of once it gets to the correct temperature and flavor and everything like that. So we're making a batch as we are going through the stream here. But if I were going to be adding anything extra to this batch beyond my color or flavor, say I'm adding in some sort of concentrate or some sort of mushroom powder, like a lion's mane mushroom powder or something like that, I will almost always typically, let me find it here. Yep. I will almost always typically use some MCT oil to help me disperse that through the batch. So I'll take a little bit of that MCT oil here, which is just a highly refined coconut oil that stays liquid at a room temperature. And I will heat that up a little bit and use that to add in my concentrates, add in my powders, or whatever I'm going to be adding to the gummies. I'll add that to the warm MCT oil, mix it up, and that will help it disperse through your entire base rather than clumping. Things like if you were to just throw powders right on top of this batch or something, you're going to get things clumping together. That's just going to help with the dispersal. So if I were adding something, that's how I would be doing it. If you were to add something fun, at which stage of the process would be a good time? All of the additions are going to happen right at the end. So after I bring this pectin base up to the temperature I'm looking for, which is 245 degrees today, then I will be whisking in my flavor and color, and that's also when you're going to be doing any other additions as well. The reason that we do it at the end is pectin is fairly temperamental with pH differences. So how acidic or how basic something is, adding acid into pectin while it's cooking starts the gelling formation, and you're not going to get a proper nice liquid pour. It's going to kind of bind up. So we don't want to be adding anything during the cooking process in case it's going to affect that pH level. We stir it in right at the end. Thanks for that question. All right, let's see over here. Just checking to see if there's questions on the other streaming locations. But I hope that answered your question. T710. Hey there, Mike. Mike was a manager of mine before I ever got into food, about a decade ago. Man, more than a decade ago. We're old, man. Hey, good to see you, bud. I hope life is fantastic. Nick came by on the last stream. I used to work at Tesla. These are some of my old Tesla buddies. Got different people popping in to say hi different times, so always nice to see them. All right, cool. How many got another question here. How many milliliters of MCT oil mixture could I add before the texture is noticeably affected? I don't know the exact amount that's going to happen at. What I always recommend is using the MCT oil to disperse some sort of additive into your gummies, you're going to be wanting to use as little oil as possible to get a nice slurry of whatever you're adding. So you don't want to be, for example, let me grab something in here. For example, if I were going to be adding some sort of base or additive into this batch of gummies, say, it's a gram of oil or a tablespoon of some sort of powder. I have my MCT oil here, and I have a very small amount here in the bottom. And all I'm doing is it's enough to properly disperse. So it's going to be likely less than in volume the amount of whatever additive you're putting into your gummies. So you're trying to keep that low. I do not know the exact, that'd be a great thing for us to know. I think I should probably test that out, see how much MCT oil I can pack in there before it's negatively affected. But my recommendation is always just try to use as little as possible to get your slurry going to add to your base. It's a great question. Thank you. And a great question for me to come back with a better answer for you next. All right, cool. Under 5% of batch weight has worked for Ashley. So that's a good number to start with. I'm still thinking I'm going to be, Mike, I'm just a couple years away from 40. Sorry to make you feel old. And yeah, Facebook is still stopped. And I don't know why. I don't know how to fix that. If I refresh it. Oh, okay, we are live on Facebook. For some reason, it just was stuck at the 10-minute timer on mine. So, okay, we are going on Facebook. That's good to know. All right, guys, you can see our base is bubbling and boiling pretty good over here. Just to give you some sort of context on how that's going, we're at about 228 degrees right now. So we've got almost 20 more degrees to go. It will get to about this temperature fairly quickly, and that temperature climb will begin to plateau for a little bit through this stage. Which is why I like using the thermometers that are going to give me an alert when we get to a certain temperature, because sometimes that it can plateau for a while and you get distracted with another project. This just helps me make sure that I'm never missing it. But yeah, guys, if you have any gummy making questions, drop them into the chat wherever you are, whether you're on Instagram, YouTube, our Facebook Gummy Makers community. I'm watching all of them. We're streaming to all of those at once right now, like we do every month. So any questions you got, drop them in there. We'll do our best to answer them for you. And yeah, I'm making a batch of our pectin-based gummies today. Our pectin-based gummies are made with all fruit and vegetable pectin, so they are completely vegan, which is a great bonus. They are also much better at standing up against temperature than something like a normal gelatin gummy. They don't melt in high heats. And while you're making the gummies, pectin can actually freeze and come back to the same exact state it was pre-frozen, which you cannot do with gelatin. Gelatin is very temperature sensitive. Taking it too cold, taking it to freezing will degrade the gelatin. Taking it too hot, if you bring it to a boil, that gelatin's also not going to work anymore. So you do have a lot more temperature range and temperature stability with the pectins. Is there a reason your pot is so large compared to the amount of gummies in here? Okay, so I actually wouldn't consider this a very large pot for what I'm doing. As any sugar boils, it's going to rise. So this is almost halfway up my pot right now. So if I were to even double the batch size in this, it very well might overflow. I would never do more than 5 pounds in this size pot, which I believe is a 2-gallon pot. And it has a diameter of 10 inches. Yeah, with a diameter of 10 inches. So this is actually what I would recommend anybody do a 5-pound batch in. If you're gonna go any larger, I wouldn't be doing it in this pot. You might, have a chance that overflowing as it rises. But yeah, I wouldn't consider this a large pot for this batch size at all. One of the things to be aware of with pot size, the big pot size and pot diameter specifically is the biggest contributing factor to how quickly something evaporates as you cook it. So if you're using a smaller diameter pot, your overall cook time is going to be longer than if you were to use a pot with a wider diameter. It's just less surface area for the steam to rise off of. So the diameter of the pot is going to be, like I said, the biggest factor in how quickly you get through the stages of this cooking process. Oh, no worries. It's probably the fisheye on the camera, but these are great questions, and thanks for dropping them in here. I really appreciate it. And for example, this is the size of my larger pot. I've got a diameter here on this one, probably of 12 to 13 inches. So if I'm doing a 15 to 20 pound batch, this is the size pot I will be doing it in, and this is, I believe, a 6. I believe I'd be 5. All right. I can, actually from that top-down view, I do see what you're saying, 710. It looks very deep, but yeah, it's about halfway up the pot right now. All right. How many gummies does a 5-pound batch make? Now that's kind of an impossible to answer question because it all depends on the size of the mold that you're using. Obviously, if I was using a mold that was twice as big as this one, I'd get half as many gummies. So it's a very difficult question to answer without knowing how big the final mold you're going to be. Now, I will say a 5-pound batch of our Naked Gold is about 1,500 milliliters worth of gummies. So typically, if somebody comes to me with a question about how many gummies a bag will make, the first question I'm going to ask is how large are your mold cavities by milliliters? So 1,500 gummies, say you have a 2 milliliter size gummy mold, you'll get about 750. If you have a 15 milliliter mold, you'll get about 100 of them. That is not accounting for loss and things like that, but that is typically how I determine how many gummies somebody should get out of a batch. Great question. Thank you so much. Hello, sea bass. Thanks for joining us. All right, guys, so I'm at 234 degrees. So we're about a little over 10 degrees away. So we're getting there. And again, those are going to be watermelon pectin gummies once we finish them up. All right, and so thanks so much, Zeus. Appreciate it. Like I've been saying, this is a batch of our pectin base. We also have a gelatin base, which is in all honesty, a much simpler process than this. It uses a double boiler setup. So what that means is you have a pot with water boiling in it and something on top that allows that steam to cook or warm whatever is in there. So this is a complete double boiler setup. So it is essentially a pot that fits inside of another pot. And this bottom pot gets the water, and water boils inside of this, where the steam will warm the upper pot. If you do not have a double boiler setup, that can just be done with a metal bowl, for example. A metal bowl like this acts just the same as the complete double boiler, actual built double boiler setup. So double boilers are very easy to do at home. If you were melting our gelatin base, the gelatin would just go in here as the water's boiling below, and that will gently melt them without hitting it with too much heat. And so that's how you would prepare our gelatin base. Oh, my pleasure, Jan. All right, let's see. Jumping over, make sure I'm not missing any questions anywhere. Doesn't look like I am. But thank you guys here again for joining us today. If you're just jumping in, my name is Kylie. I'm the R&D chef here at Candy Pros. If you ever call in with any R&D questions, it's me that you're going to get on the phone. And this is a stream that we do once a month, every third Wednesday of the month. We're streaming on multiple platforms. We're on our YouTube channel, which is Candy Pros Gummies. We are also on Instagram at Candy Pros. We are also streaming on a Facebook group called the Gummy Makers Community, powered by Candy Pros. So if you haven't joined that, it's a great community where people who use our products get together to chat, talk about things, and we are streaming there as well. And we stream every third Wednesday of the month at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. So if you ever have any questions, you can always bring them here, or you can give us a ring and you'll get me on the phone. All right. And I'm just jumping between our streams, making sure I don't miss questions in the chats. All right, and again, if you do drop a question, I promise I will get to it. Some of the streams are more delayed than others, so it's probably coming down the line. If I just haven't answered it yet, it might just be delayed in the stream. All right, but we are looking good, I think. Don't think I've missed any questions, which is wonderful. But if you guys do have any questions, just drop them in the chat of whatever platform you're on. We are 10 degrees away from being able to wrap up this batch of pectin gummies. But once this batch is flavored, I'm going to be pouring it out here onto our molds using the flood and scrape technique to get those filled. Oh, you're very welcome, T. That's what I'm here for. Love you too. I appreciate all your questions today. It's been a great help. So thank you. But yeah, once this pectin base comes to temperature, I will be adding my flavor and color, pouring it out onto these molds. And then once everything's out on the molds and I've done the scrape, I will let these kind of cool off at room temperature or steam off for a little bit before I throw them into my freezer here. when I use the pectin base, I like to freeze the gummies because it just makes demolding very, very, very easy tomorrow once they're completely set. But our pectin base does set very quickly. And depending on how you're cooling them, you can be demolding these in as quickly as 15 minutes after pouring. So it is very quick once it's out of the pot. Much quicker than the gelatin base. The gelatin base will need to set at least overnight or an 8-hour period at least to properly hold its shape once out of the mold. But pectin happens much quicker. It sets much quicker. But I just use the same color and flavor no matter which base I'm using. That flavoring and coloring is very interchangeable. I am using concentrated flavor and color today, but you do not need to. I love making our gummies with actual fruit powder and stuff. Do I also air dry the pectin gummies? Actually, yes, I got distracted and didn't finish what I was saying, so let me wrap up on that. So after I let these cool down and I throw them in my freezer, I will demold them the next day or same day if I'm trying to get things done quickly. I'll demold them and either toss them in a finishing sugar of some sort or in some sort of anti-stick coating if I don't want to sugar them. And then I will put them on a sheet tray just like this without the mold on it and throw them on my speed rack where I will let them cure overnight. Again, about 8 hours will typically be good. I always say overnight just to be safe. But that is how I will quote unquote dry them. It's more of a curing process, but yeah. Thank you for that question, Debbie. You reminded me that I didn't finish my thought, so thanks. Appreciate the kind words as well. All right. Looks like we're doing pretty good. Don't think I've missed anything yet. All right, cool. All right, guys, so we are at 237 degrees currently. And so what this is doing with our pectin base is cooking out that water that we use to melt down the cubes at the beginning of the process. Again, it's why we use temperature to let you know when you're done, because the temperature is a far more accurate ability of knowing that that water is out of there than anything like time or visual cues, things like that. All right. Check my other strings here. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Over on Instagram or Facebook. It does appear as if YouTube is kind of the most immediate, where I see things the most quickly, but I am keeping an eye on everything. But that curing process that I was just speaking on, the overnight cure, is pretty integral, or integral to either the pectin base that we're doing today or the gelatin base. That's a step that you definitely don't want to be skipping. And gotta get my heat gun ready to go. I'm getting a little bit closer to being ready here. Okay. Sorry guys, hang with me. Getting things plugged in down here. So I've got my heat gun. I'm going to be using this heat gun to heat up my spatula when I go to do the flooding scrape. That just helps make sure that I don't have any gummies that are kind of connected by a very thin membrane between the mold punches. So that's what I was setting up down there. All right, we're getting close. We are at 240. So this is going to come up pretty quickly. Guys, have I tried using a modified starch or agar as the binding agent? We have, and we've done that in the past. But this is our own pectin base. And so that's what this one is made. Yeah, the heat gun is a great way to kind of make sure that you get that like thin layer against the top of the mold. It makes demolding a much cleaner situation. And yeah, we landed with pectin because we love the texture. And agar is actually just a very expensive product in general. And we prefer the texture to the starch. So that's why we landed with pectin as our vegan option. And we love the heat resistance that it provides. All right, we're getting close here. Just a couple more degrees, it seems. And that's it. So I'm going to kill my heat here. And I'll get the camera switched over so you guys can see what I am doing. Let me go to my overheads. Okay, so I'm going to be adding in my flavor, which is watermelon, and my color here. Typically, I would do this mixing off of the heat. It's just to be extra safe that I'm not overcooking anything. I'm doing it right here because this is where I have my camera set up. And I'm feeling fairly confident that I'm not going to burn anything. All right, cool. So we've got our watermelon flavor and color in there. Now, I'm going to be prepping my molds. So let me go back to my main here. All right, so I'm going to be prepping my molds with a little bit of some sort of release agent. I just use an MCT oil and an atomizer. Just a nice light misting there. Helps with the release. And remember the heat gun is going to be heating up my metal scraper. I'm going to be setting that off to the side here as I get things poured. So let me get that set up here. Down. Perfect. Okay, guys. Here we go with the pour. Let me grab a spatula. Get everything else out of there. All right. So I've got that warmed up spatula or bench scraper. Sorry. Then I'm just making sure that I'm trying to make all of my molds here filled. All right, awesome. So just break that off there. All right. So guys, I've got my sheet of gummies here. Now, I'm going to let's get you back up to me here. Awesome. Cool. So one of the things I'm going to show you here before we wrap up with the gummies, I'm going to let them set for a couple minutes, and I'm going to show you one of the things that I do to help me with demolding and just being as successful as possible with that. With either of our gummy bases, you can reuse anything that's not properly filled. Like so, typically, these edge gummies that you see here that are completely filled, obviously those aren't things that you want to be selling or anything like that. But that can be reused very simply. If I was making more watermelon gummies, I could just throw those individual pieces back into the melting gummies if I wanted to. I could also use a microwave to melt them down. Same with the gelatin base. I could use a microwave to melt down any of the not complete pieces there. But one of the things I'm going to show you that works with this pectin base, doesn't work with the gelatin because it doesn't set quite as fast, is I'm going to set this so that every gummy that's still left now in the molds is one I want to be using. And I'm going to do that before I set it in my freezer or anything like that. So when I go to demold it tomorrow, I'm not going to be having to pick out individual pieces that aren't completely filled. So I'm actually going to be doing that ahead of time, very simply. It's, like I said, very simple with the pectin base. And so we'll do that together before we finish up here today. But I am going to check our other streams here real quick. Make sure I'm not missing any questions. Doesn't look like I am. But yeah, so I will typically give this 15 to 30 minutes before throwing it in my freezer, just so it's not creating a bunch of steam in there and creating a bunch of ice. Deb, vegans happy. Is this the acid or calcium type? Are bubbles less of a concern with pectin than gelatin? I'm not sure what you're asking with acid or calcium type. But bubbles, I would say, if I had to pick one or the other, which is less of a concern, it would probably be the gelatin, just because it's set slower, so bubbles have a chance to release themselves a little bit more. But yeah, that's what I would say with the bubbles. But I wouldn't really call it a concern with either. However, the like if you were trying to do get the absolute best imprint on a gummy or something like that, I would probably say gelatin, just because it does get those hard corners just a little bit better. But that's if you were, making meat juice. But as far as is this the acid or calcium type? You do not have to set it in the freezer. No, it's just something I prefer doing because it won't ruin the product, and I find that it is easier to demold when they're frozen. However, you can do that completely at room temperature. Just give it about 8 hours, especially at room temp. What's your recommendation to use as a sour base with sugar for coating? So in your finishing sugars, if you want to be adding something sour, type of acid, there's a few acids you could choose from. You have citric, which you find in citrus. You can do malic acid, which is something that you find in other fruits. There's also lactic acid that you find in fermented dairy products. So there are options available to you, depending on kind of what sour profile you're going for. However, the most important thing that you need to be aware of when adding acid into your sugars is that that acid is encapsulated. Most citric acid, so if you were to go to Vaughn's or the grocery store or Walmart or something to get citric acid, there is very, very little chance that it is an encapsulated citric acid. What that means is each of the granules of acid is covered in some sort of very, very thin coating that keeps it from being hydropermeable. because citric acid wants to leach water out of the air. It wants to leach them definitely out of the gummies that you've coated them in. So if you were to use an acid that is not encapsulated, your gummies will likely become a big goo ball as they leach any moisture that they can out of it. Using the encapsulated acid stops that from happening. So again, the most important thing when choosing an acid to add to your sugar base is that it is encapsulated. Do not use a non-encapsulated acid. The pectin type, the gel set HM versus LM. You might be asking questions a little outside my wheelhouse. I'm not a food scientist. There are things that I do know. I didn't go to school for food science though, so there are some like abbreviations that I'm not going to be privy to. But this pectin base is derived almost certain from apple skins. Almost certain. I think it is an apple pectin. My team might be able to confirm that for me, but fairly sure. All right. Okay. And actually, I think we're at that point where I can show you guys how I pre-treat my molds before I allow them to completely set. So let me put my camera down here and show y'all. Okay. So, might be able to tell here, but I mean, it's been maybe 10 minutes since I poured this out, but I can touch into most of these and they are starting to set. So I will show you here what I'm going to do. Let me grab that A container. And my all right, so what I'm actually going to do, I like doing this with my pectin base just because it makes things more simple on me when I'm demolding. I can go through and actually pull out all of these edge pieces that aren't quite there. It's very simple. I can just kind of keep a big ball of it and stick it to itself. And what I'm going to be doing is making sure that everything that I leave left in this mold is going to be a piece that I want to use. So it's a completely full mold cavity. And so I'm not having to go through and pick these out during demolding or sanding, especially because I don't want my loss sanded. Bring me up to the top. I won't make you sit through all of this, but I don't want my loss to be sanded ahead of time, especially if I'm using a sour sugar or something like that, because I want to be able to reuse this. Like I said earlier, you can throw this into your pot, as long as you're not mixing flavors or whatever, but you can throw it back into your pot with your next batch. Or once I filled this, I could put this into the microwave to melt it down and pour it out again. So this is a great way to combat loss as well as combat wasted time going through gummies to make sure they're the ones that you want at the end. Yeah. Loss is a big issue for a lot of people, especially for our customers in the cannabis space. They don't want to be losing, product that they spent really good money on. So this is what I would recommend to people to try to combat any loss like that. Do I have any recommendations for non-sugar coatings? Non-sugar. So I have coated gummies in cocoa powder. That's worked well. Mixtures of cocoa powder and powdered sugar, but that's still sugar and not what you're asking for. I have finished gummies in chocolate. I've finished gummies in, you know what, let me grab it and I'll show you. Can't find it immediately offhand, but I have finished gummies in powdered honey. I have also used matcha. I've finished them in matcha as well. So there are things that you can use. Typically when I'm using powders like a matcha or a cocoa powder, I will add in some powdered sugar, mostly for the cornstarch that's in there to help with liquid leaching or sticking or things like that. Actually, yeah, as I said that, I saw that come in. So cornstarch will totally work. It's just about what you want your final product to be. I've also used cinnamon in cornstarch. So that is totally an option. I would just, yeah, and rings, yeah, the anti-stick coating, like I spoke about earlier. If you don't want to be sanding them or adding any sort of thing on the outside, we use an anti-stick coating made by Loran's, but you can also use carnauba wax. Seems like high methyloxylpectin acid set works best for these square holes, and maybe individual calcium drops work well for squeeze bottle filling multiple individual holes. That's something I'm going to have to read up on. You're a little bit beyond my depth, I think, Debbie. I know the product well, the science though. You're making me want to read and learn, so thank you for that. Checking everything else. Making sure I'm not missing any questions on our other stream locations. But again, before we move too far away from it, for cornstarch coating, just make sure that you're testing it and not ruining the experience of eating your gummies by overstarching them or something like that. Gotcha. Thinking cornstarch, trying to get my moisture-sugar ratio where it dries a harder shell. Yeah, if you're looking to kind of change that texture from the outside to the inside, your starch is definitely going to be the way to go there. That's going to absorb and pull more than anything else in a way that's not going to gooify your gummies like acid. So I think you're right on line there as well. All right, guys, so we will be wrapping up here pretty shortly. Thank you for all of you guys that have spent time with us today. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. If you have any questions before our next stream, which is going to be next month on the third Wednesday of the month, what day is that? Let's see. What day of the week is next Wednesday? So it will look like our next stream will be on September 16th. So if you have any questions between now and then, you can save them for that next stream. Or if you can always give us a call. I'm here to help out any of our customers to be as successful as possible with our product. And I love chatting with you guys. I've had some good conversations with some of you this week. But yeah, thank you, Debbie. Thanks for coming here. Thanks for piquing my interest with some new science. I always love that. I always love learning. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me. We will be live next month on September 16th. Same time, same place. Bring your questions. Yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful week. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right. Oh, and if you haven't, make sure you're following us on our other profiles. If you're on YouTube, you can follow us on Instagram at Candy Pros. On Facebook, we have the Gummy Makers community powered by Candy Pros. And if you're on one of those, we have a YouTube channel, which is Candy Pros Gummies, where you can see other videos, other recordings of our previous live streams. So make sure to check those out, and I'll see you guys next month.